Alright dudes, Star Wars Outlaws is out and it's bigger than you think. A lot of things actually can go really wrong in a galaxy far away, which is why today we're going to go over the biggest tips and tricks that I wish I knew the first time I played. Coming up to number 1, the biggest tip is to obviously make use of Nyx, your trusty companion. He's going to be doing a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to assisting you in combat, distracting enemies, setting off traps, retrieving items, or even accessing hard to reach areas. And you can do so by pressing the Q key on the keyboard or equivalent on the controller, which is going to be extremely helpful because this is also a good way to see what objects in the environment he can interact with and how they can best serve you both in combat as well as exploration. Distracting enemies is one of his biggest draws. Of course, you're going to always want to have enemies distracted by Nyx as you either move by or move in to take down one of their other companions. Nyx is also great at retrieving items from the environment, be it consumables, collectibles, or even key cards needed to access otherwise inaccessible areas. However, I really like using Nyx at sabotage, especially when it comes to these exploding canisters, or even more so the suspended weights. More often than not, enemies will have patrols very close to them, so you can just set them off and instantly take down an entire group of enemies. Beyond that, I also recommend going in and indulging in any street food mini games that you might notice. This is basically the main way in which you unlock new functionalities for Nyx, such as, for example, an early on upgrade that lets Nyx distract multiple enemies at once. It actually comes in very handy during combat. At number 2, let's talk about combat, and specifically stealth is highly encouraged and rewarded in this game. Stealth takedowns are extremely fast and even more so much better oftentimes than full-on blaster shots. For some reason, it's much more efficient to go upside somebody's head than it is to pump them full of lead, or well, in this case, laser shots. You're always going to want to avoid enemy alarms too, either by sabotaging them preemptively or by just taking down any enemy that might head towards them. This is something that's going to always be indicated with a special icon when it happens. This is going to be a great way to avoid being overrun by enemies, but if it still happens, there are a few more things that you can do. One of them is to always dodge and go beyond cover. This is going to help you avoid most of the damage, as KhrazeGaming is not particularly tanky, nor do you have any good firepower. Your blasters are upgradable, but you do need quite a bit of progression for that. Plus, you're going to be overwhelmed by the number of higher rank enemies attacking you with much more powerful weapons. You can also retrieve said weapons either by picking them off yourself or by having Nyx retrieve them. However, keep in mind that you can only use such a weapon for one single charge, or basically one clip. You cannot hold enemy weapons indefinitely, and K eventually will throw it back on the ground, point at which you either have to switch back to your own blaster or find a new weapon instead. That's why at number 3, you're going to want to always look out for expert missions. These are missions in which you have to rescue or find special NPCs that will teach you new abilities. And there are many new abilities that you can unlock even early on. There are 6 abilities per expert that you can unlock, giving you some extra bonuses. Like for example, Bram early on will give you a lot of the basic survival that you need, social abilities, and even health upgrades, including armored undershirt, which gives you increased HP. But there are others, such as Sallow, who's a mechanic and who's going to help you a ton to unlock extra speeder abilities, making exploration that much better. Or Ayla, who's a slicer, will have a lot of expert slicing abilities, helping you a ton with the lockpicking minigame. And beyond this, I recommend to always pay attention to these respective challenge tracks that are associated with unlocking these abilities. Typically, they will require you to complete contracts, missions, gather resources, or even handle and take down enemies in different ways. So in this way, you can just track how close you are to completing such an ability quest and then get notified if you are getting closer to completing it. It's always worth it, and it's always going to give you something special. At number 4, the various crime factions of this game are as much of a problem as they are an opportunity, depending on which one you pick to side with. There are many opportunities to side with different factions as you perform missions or go into contracts, and you're going to be given ample opportunities both to pick your sides as well as to double cross them. And this is why it's important to pay attention to your ranking with each faction. The more you go into the friendly zone, the better items and even new abilities you're going to unlock. The point that some of the factions may have a very good and desirable gear that you can only get at high standing. Otherwise, if you go too much into the low, they might become enemies and even start hunting you down, especially when you're out in the open. So just to go over some of the examples, the Pike Syndicates are really good at infiltration and basically giving you a lot of firepower. If you go ahead and fully max them out, eventually you're going to get a full-on Imperial disguise, which is going to let you pretty much avoid detection by Imperials, unlocked with the max reputation. But it can also give you a lot of other bonuses, like for example getting free grenades when you throw grenades, and even getting upgrades for your blasters. Meanwhile, the Crimson Dawn are much better to provide stealth gear, especially if you want to use smoke bombs or want to get healing every time you perform stealth takedowns. And finally, the Hut Cartel. This seems to be more oriented towards just adrenaline generation as well as overall defenses. So if you really enjoy your adrenaline mechanic, your ultimate, this can actually help a ton. You can generate more of it, and it's also very good. It's kind of like a dead eye ability that's going to absolutely blast enemies no matter what. And absolutely, adrenaline actually goes through enemy shields, so as you encounter more of these higher ranking enemies and you have trouble taking them down, your adrenaline shots are pretty much going to guarantee a one shot. Now, since we talked about exploration, this is another huge part of the game. You're going to notice that as soon as you hit Mirogana, these maps are absolutely massive. So almost open world over there, giving you a lot of options to discover new places, secret merchants, and even a lot of missions and open world side events. Beyond that, you can always call your speeder no matter what, as long as you're out in the open, by pressing the D-pad or Y on the controller, which is going to usually summon it at your location. You cannot use any other vehicle besides the speeder and your ship, unfortunately, but it will help you a ton to discover everything that you need. And again, those upgrades are going to help a ton in discovering stuff. And surprisingly, a lot of this is actually tied to random events and other open world activities, which you're going to notice with a question mark on the map. Typically, if you see one marked on the map, it means the spot is worth discovering, typically involving some kind of new event, even quests, or even speeder races as you progress further in the game. And for better exploration, this is why you're going to want to use your grappling hook, which you unlock very early on. This is going to help you navigate a lot easier, especially since many areas and even hidden caves are hidden or vertically accessible only. Beyond this, also when you access new areas, it's not always worth it to go in guns blazing or on the path that's most filled with enemies. Usually there's always going to be an adjacent, more hidden path that may be harder to discover, but it's much more worth it and will make it much easier for you, as you can just go in undetected. You will also encounter many pirate raid events, which lead to stealing Imperial supplies, giving you a lot more resources to craft items and upgrade gear. Usually, Imperial forces will fight with the bandits, and you can wait their fight out to see who comes out on the other side, and then you can sneak around to steal all of those supplies way easier. Also important to mention, each material you gather or need will specify which area you can find them in. So absolutely make sure to check their description to see where you have to go to find them before spending money at any merchant. Of course, as you uncover new stuff, you're also going to be running into lockpicking. Now, I'm not going to lie, initially I thought this was a bit too challenging, so there are a couple of things you can do. First of all, this is a rhythm-based minigame. Just pay attention to the rhythm that plays out, and this is the same pattern that you have to repeat. So whichever series of clicks you hear, repeat them in the same rhythm. But you can also activate the UI helper, which is going to give you some visual lights to help you a lot, extra cues to basically complete it a lot easier. The only thing remaining to talk about is, of course, outer space, which is also worth exploring. There are many missions, including ones that provide extra reputation with the various factions. So if you want some extra reputation, you can go ahead and do so, but they also provide many more rewards on top, including a lot of these boxes that you can destroy to retrieve extra crafting materials and other resources that you will need in your journey. But space is not like completely seamless. Of course, you do have that transition from planet to space. However, most of the planets only have a couple of landing spots. You cannot go and fully explore the planet like how you would do in No Man's Sky, for example. You can only pick those specific spots. But beyond that, it's pretty fun. There's many encounters in there too, plus a lot of fighting going on, and typically you're going to get a lot of upgrades for your Trailblazer as well to get more firepower and deal more damage. But anyway, that concludes today's video. Let me know down below if there's any other tips or tricks that you discovered in your journey, and in the meantime, I'll see you in the next video.